Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I'd like to welcome you to the Future of Meetings Symposium, and I am hoping you're enjoying the event so far. My name is Shanoa Tremblay, and I'm one of the organizers of this symposium. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional owners of the land I am meeting on today, and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I'd like to introduce the speakers for this next section titled The Future is Here, Implications for Accessibility. Adem, Andrew, and Chris will be speaking on behalf of Intopia, a company whose vision is to create tools and help companies be more inclusive. COVID-19 has brought the virtual world and virtual meetings into the now for many people. The working from home opportunities in virtual meeting environments bring with it a wealth of opportunity for people with disability, especially for those who find travel in an office environment difficult. Adem, Andrew, and Chris are going to discuss issues around inclusivity and provide tips for making your meetings more inclusive for people with disability. Adem is one of the co-founders of Intopia and the Director of Accessible Technologies. He has over 12 years of hands-on professional experience working in web development, training, and consulting, with a focus on working with accessibility within organizations. Andrew is a principal consultant with Intopia and has been working in the field of digital accessibility for over 20 years. This is included in establishing the digital access team at Vision Australia. Chris is a digital accessibility consultant at Intopia and has a long background in working for companies on accessibility teams, including Uber. Thank you, Adem, Chris, and Andrew, and the team at Intopia. We look forward to your talk.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our session, The Future is Here, Implications for Accessibility. We'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners across all of the lands on which we are meeting today, and pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. My name is Chris Pycroft. I am a digital accessibility consultant at Intopia, and I'd like to welcome you to today's session. Joining me is Adem Sifsioglu, a co-founder of Intopia, as well as the Director of Accessible Technologies, as well as Andrew Arch, Intopia's principal accessibility consultant. Today's session is going to be in two parts. The first part will be pre-recorded, where we will, between the three of us, tackle the topic of the implications of accessibility for the future of meetings. We'll then be following this up immediately with a live Q&A to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. If you are watching this session on demand and aren't able to join us for the live Q&A, we do have a virtual booth that will be open throughout the entire 3 days of the symposium. Feel free to swing by at any point and find out some more information about accessibility. We've got a couple of resources that are available at our booth, and also the opportunity to ask us any questions that you might have. So for the topic of this session, the future is here, implications of accessibility. COVID-19 has brought the concept of virtual meetings and work environments from the future into the present for many organizations. Work from home opportunities and virtual meeting environments brings with it a wealth of opportunities for people with a disability to participate in society and in the workplace, potentially more than ever before, particularly for those who find travel and office environments difficult. However, if accessibility is not considered, the work from home and virtual meeting environments can become even more exclusionary than the traditional office environment. And this is what we're hoping to unpack a bit more with today's session. So our first question, and I'm going to throw this one over to Adem first. So Adem, what is your perspective on the future of meetings, and how does accessibility fit into that?
So Chris, I think you you touched on part of it in your opening there, in terms of the opportunities that are opened by, I guess, the byproduct of COVID-19, and the fact that the going into the office environment for a meeting, which you know many of us are used to doing, isn't currently possible. And I think, you know, the future of meetings is something similar to what we're doing right now, which is, you know, sitting here on a Zoom conference, talking to I don't know how many people are out there in the conference today, or those that are watching this on demand. And I think this type of technology is where the future of meetings is going. You know, more accessible in the sense of not having to be at a physical location, and you can effectively dial in from your desk like we've all done, and be in the room with as many other people as needs to be.
I think it's highlighted the fact that we don't need to all be in the office, which opens up opportunities, particularly for people with disability who may have difficulty travelling, may have difficulty being in the office for a variety of reasons, and the recognition that we don't all have to be there all the time. Hopefully this now opens up the opportunity for organisations to consider employing more people with disabilities who are capable of doing the job, but might not be capable of being in the office 40 hours a week.
Yeah, Andrew, I can't remember who I heard this from the other day, but I heard someone say something along the lines of, the office is now wherever you want it to be. And I think that sums it up pretty well for me. Is you can now work effectively from anywhere, and gone are the days of, you know, you can't do this from home, or you can't work from home because you won't have access to the systems or the technology, or you need to be in the office to do A, B, and C. Well, this has just proven that that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
Yes, so the physical constraints of the office hopefully are being done away with, but we do need to be careful about the virtual constraints that we might be imposing through virtual meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was going to be the next question that I was actually going to ask you, Andrew. What are some of those, not just accessibility, but also just general usability things as well, that often do need to get experience, or that are different in a virtual meeting environment?
Well, the platform's vitally important. I mean, traditionally you'd have had teleconferences, and it all would be done by telephone, which for somebody who had trouble concentrating, or had hearing impairments, or was deaf, made it very difficult. The idea of being able to have captioning in conferences where we've got the video makes life easier, but the automated captioning is still not 100%, but my experience has been that it actually does quite a reasonable job. I've been in several meetings over the last few months where we've turned the captioning on, or somebody's turned it on for one reason or another, and it's about 95% plus correct. There's a few bloopers in there occasionally, but it's pretty good these days. The area where it gets a little tricky for some people is, if you're relying on being able to see people's expressions, and if we get everybody turning their video off. That said, days spent on video conferencing, as we all have experienced, can become very tiring. So for people for whom fatigue becomes an issue during the day, that is another complication that gets added by the virtual meetings. And they're just a couple of the things that we actually need to be very cognizant of when we're setting up meeting after meeting after meeting. We're expecting people to concentrate looking at a screen rather than being in a live situation, with people close to them, that you can read the body language about somebody needing a break, or tiring, or lacking concentration, and we all go and get a cup of tea, or just pause the meeting and have a conversation about something else.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Andrew, but I'm one that since the work from home has started, I'm noticing I'm taking less breaks. And so one of the things that I hope is not the future of meetings is that we find ourselves sitting at the desk for 8 hours a day because we're in back-to-back meetings, and we get up to go to the bathroom or go have dinner, because I think that is a negative, potential negative byproduct for anybody, whether that's someone with a disability or not. I think the fact that we're sitting a lot more, and it's kind of in our own sort of home environment, means I think we need to be more careful and more conscious of getting up, moving around, which you might do sort of organically in the office environment, because someone will say, "Oh, hey, let's go downstairs and get a coffee, or you know, go for a chat or lunch or anything like that." I think that's one of those things we need to watch as well.
Yes, I think, you know, in this virtual environment of meetings, we're not sure who's had back-to-back meetings, you know, and so it's easy to line them up and not account for those breaks that we, as you say, we take organically during the day.
Well, because there's no travel time now, right?
That's right. Just on those breaks, you know, the other thing to be cognizant of, I think, is that, you know, some people take longer to take those breaks, just due to, you know, their own abilities or you know, the technology that they might be using, whether that be a wheelchair or you know, or whatever, or you know, if you've got a disability, you may have a carer who's helping you with some things due to that disability. So some of those breaks may need to be longer than you realise, because you can't actually see the physical environment that somebody is actually operating in, because we're in a virtual environment here.
That's
The
right.
other thing that I wanted to mention, you know, in response to your question, Crispy, is that we do have a variety of different platforms that we're using, and that provides, you know, some of them more accessible than others. Um, but they all have different usability features. And I know that swapping from one platform to the other, and I'm often using, you know, 2 or 3 or sometimes even 4 during a day for different clients that I'm working with, means that, you know, that cognitive load of trying to work out, how do I mute myself in this particular platform versus another? How do I bring up somebody full screen rather than having them all paneled, or how do I share my screen if I needed to talk about a document that I might have been preparing with them? You know, just adds to that load of tiredness and trying to work out just how to use those different platforms. And you know, because they all operate slightly differently, you know, there is that extra load on us all, but particularly on people who you know, maybe particularly used to one platform, worked out how to use it without a mouse, say, and then they've got to swap to a new platform because a particular meeting with another organisation might require a different platform.
Yeah, I think some of the most commonly used phrases, I think, of 2020 are either going to be "you're on mute" or "how do I share my screen?" I think with so many different meeting environments. So I've actually worked previously at a workplace where they've actually called one of their virtual teleconference meeting rooms "you're on mute" for specifically that reason. So definitely know that feeling very, very well.
Yep.
I'm just going to throw it over to Adam for our last question, just to touch on a couple of things that we were talking about there. What are some of the things, Adam, that you would suggest for anybody watching or listening to this presentation right now, that what they can do to help make their virtual workplace and meeting environments more accessible?
So I think, and I know we talked about some of the things earlier, but the virtual platform that's being used is really important, and getting an understanding of the accessibility features of the platform you're using. Doesn't necessarily mean that the platform's going to be 100% perfect and you know, completely accessible and it's all going to work for everything you try to do. And we know that, you know, accessibility is not sort of set and forget, black and white. So you know, there will be issues and problems with all platforms. Some will have more than others, but I think the key thing for me, given a lot more is moving to video based virtual platforms, is having a look at what those platforms can do, what they can offer in terms of accessibility features, and then, you know, testing it out to see if it works, and depending on your environment, your organization, some might work better than others for you. So I think that's the key. Another one being, we talked about the breaks earlier, and Andrew talked about, you know, the 5-minute break not necessarily being 5 minutes. I think being conscious of the fact that, yes, you know, we might all be at home and in our own sort of let's call it comfort zone, or an environment that we're comfortable in, but still making sure that we're being conscious and not booking in back-to-back meetings. You know, if a meeting finishes at 11 o'clock, the next meeting shouldn't start at 11 o'clock or 11:05. You know, maybe there's a mandatory rule of some type that there's always a half an hour between between every meeting, or so. I don't know what the answer is, but being sort of more conscious of that fatigue and that you know, mental capacity to sit in front of a video conference or a computer from the start of the day to the end of the day is a really key one, because I'm one of those people that, you know, I do have a lot of meetings in my day, and by the end of some days I'm half asleep by, you know, 2:30 in the afternoon, and that's not a good look for anybody who's on a meeting with me after that time. So, you know, making sure that we are looking after each other and looking after the people that we're actually meeting with. And if you know, we notice that we've got a day full of meetings and we're in the meetings with the same people all day, maybe changing it up, maybe looking at the different methods. So if you're primarily using video, then I don't know, maybe one of your meetings can, instead of video, be on the phone or chat or whatever other technology it might be. Just because we're using video a lot these days doesn't mean video is the only medium, or, you know, the best medium. Maybe things don't require a meeting. Maybe we can look at how we do things, you know, over email, so that you're not actually sitting there and having to keep attention for as long as you need to over a video conference. Who knows? I could also just be rambling here, but
One thing I'd add to that is, if you're organising a meeting with people that you haven't regularly met with in the past, you should ask them if they have any accessibility requirements. Do they need an interpreter? Do they need an Auslan interpreter, for instance? Do they need captioning? Do they need a break? Let them volunteer these types of things, and ask them if there's anything particular that they need. If your meeting is going to be, you know, more than, say, 15 minutes, in those cases, but, you know, even a 15-minute meeting may require some accommodations, like some captioning to be provided. And some of the platforms have automated captioning. Other times, if it's a more formal meeting, you may want to, you know, organise live captioning from one of the organisations that offers that.
Great, thank you to you both. Hopefully, if technology prevails, we'll now be switching over from this pre-recorded part to the live Q&A.
Thanks.